time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel Brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Thanks for joining us. My name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my awesome big brother.
Love the role. Thanks.
I'm glad to be with you again, and we're really happy this evening to be joined in the studio by one of our favorite people, our dear friend and colleague and return guest, Dr. Madeline Castellanos.
Thank you, guys. It's great to be back.
Really so good to see you.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Yes. As I said, if you're watching on Facebook, greetings. Thank you for joining us, and please hit the like and share button. And if you're listening on the radio, we're in South Florida on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM on WNN. The call-in line is 888-565-1470. Feel free to join the conversation, give us a call, or if you're on Facebook, just hit that send email button and send us a question, and our wonderful producer, Freddie, will let us know that you got something on your mind. Hopefully. So, as I said, if you saw on Facebook our description earlier, our dear friend Madeline is truly like a unicorn, especially in our we're always talking about how small the field of sex therapy is and how few sex therapists there are, and we often talk about sexual medicine still in its kind of infancy as a new field, but within those very small fields, you are one of the rare unicorns that is not only a psychiatrist that actually counsels their patients and doesn't treat with the prescription pad, but a psychiatrist who counsels patients who is a sex therapist and trained in sexual medicine and knows how to truly integrate all of these things that we're constantly griping about. Sexual medicine, counseling, the holistic approach to treating the patient.
Right, rather than just throwing a medication at them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And which has brought, all of this integration has brought you to, again, another kind of a new specialty, functional medicine. And I'm sure many of our listeners would appreciate a little elevator pitch description of what functional medicine is about.
Sure, absolutely. So again, thank you guys for having me here tonight. I am a psychiatrist originally by training and got into sex therapy very early in that training. So I've been doing that for about 20 years. And I got into functional medicine about a decade ago because of some of my own health issues that none of the doctors really seemed to want to help or kept telling me,
able to.
There's nothing wrong with you. And I was like, well, how come I have all these weird pains everywhere? So a friend of mine she does emergency medicine, dragged me to the first functional medicine conference. And I really didn't know anything about it, except she thought it was a great idea. And so I was like, okay, well, let's do it. And I learned that functional medicine is a systems approach to medicine, basically understanding that everything in the body is in constant communication with every other part of the body. So it is artificial and naive, I guess, to try to separate those parts of the body and believe that we can just treat this over here without it affecting downstream or upstream, many different things. So functional medicine takes all that into consideration and looks for the root cause of symptoms rather than just trying to apply a medication as a Band-Aid, which usually will end up causing other side effects, number one. And number two, it does nothing to alleviate the initial irritant that's causing the symptom to begin with. So after time, the body may then find, the person might find that the body's acclimated and the medication no longer works anymore.
Sure.
Right? You've heard that one?
I mean, the mess we're in now, and especially with drug interactions and with an aging population. Who can think of anybody over 65 or 70 that's not on 3 or 4 medications at least?
At least.
Minimum.
Well, the average person over 65 is on average 4 medications.
Wow.
If they're
Yeah.
institutionalized, like in a nursing home, that can go up to 17.
Oh, at least I've
Yeah,
seen people on
daily.
more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes even with different effects, it's like you're like, this doesn't make any sense pharmacologically speaking, biochemically speaking.
Right. And that's the part that drives me crazy about so much of it out there, which is, again, one of the reasons I so appreciate what you do. Because, and we see this again with seniors, this prescribing cascade that it's
Yeah.
often referred to, that for every medication that's prescribed, there are 1, 2, or 3 for the effects and side
Yes.
effects of that medication.
Yes.
Right? And, the typical allopathic, approach, and again, what I like about what you do as well is it seems that people don't quite get that the symptom you have may not be related to anything that you think it's related to.
Right.
Right? That I may have a pain in my shoulder. And it may have nothing to do with my shoulder.
Right. Exactly.
And it sounds like sexual problems.
Well, but I think, kind of as a way of sort of, going into that area, I think this is sort of part of that foundation of how functional medicine is really, I think, a really good platform to look at sexual health, sexual medicine.
It's really changed the way I look at all of medicine, first of all. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I started with sex therapy very early on in my psychiatry career is because it was a systems approach to sexual health problems. And it wasn't just like, oh, let's give them Viagra, right? Which was brand new when, I started in studying sex therapy. And we talk about everything. What's going on with you physically? What's going on with you mentally? What's going on with the relationship?
Right.
What's going on with your stress levels? Because all of those things are going to affect you. So we do the same thing in functional medicine. There's a lot of focus on nutrition. There's a lot of focus on lifestyle. There's a lot of focus on connections and socialization and how are you using your body and your brain, right? And there's a lot of focus on genetics and your susceptibility to toxins, how you metabolize nutrients. But your thought process is just, I think people underestimate the effect that stress has on their body. Because people will say, oh, I have lots of stress, but I'll deal with it. Or it's just in my head. Or they told me it's all in my head. And what I tell people...
Which is like not part of our body?
Right. Oh, that's
Right.
disconnected completely. So I explain to people, like, everything that you think, everything that you feel, everything that you experience immediately gets translated into your physiology. So via your nervous system, via the endocrine system, the neurotransmitters, it becomes a physiological response. So we know that stress affects your immune functioning, it affects your gastric motility, so how fast you digest your food. It's going to affect your hormone balance,
And
your
then the
blood
chronic
sugar
illness just starts
regulation,
like dominoes,
your
right?
sleep, and
You
of
get
course,
this metabolic syndrome.
Right.
Everything starts
Well, we used
falling
to also refer to like allostatic load, right?
Yes.
That when you talk about,
does that mean?
stress is a good thing, right? Stress is a
You're
good thing.
nerding out again.
No, but it's this effect of chronic stress that
Oh, sure.
at first, again, this is what people don't realize is, and I think people also make these, arbitrary lines. It's like, no, I'm not stressed. It's anxiety.
right.
Or I just worry a little bit.
Right.
Without we are in this perpetual, for most people, in this perpetual survival mode.
Yes.
That
Fight or flight.
autonomic nervous system, that's
Right.
fight or flight.
Or freeze.
Right? Or free, exactly. That's
freeze.
the third F. There's a fourth F, but the third F on those. But people are in these almost permanent states.
Yes.
And without realizing that when we go into this mode, a lot of things are, certainly good things are elevated. But then after a while, especially immunologically, we get suppressed. And we
Right.
maintain suppressed immune system, increased inflammation, and a lot of this stuff is driven, maintained, and locked in by the thought process.
Well, absolutely correct. And I think people, they don't understand how their thoughts can create such metabolic disturbances over time. And that's a great point, that the allostatic load is very important, because we are designed to have stresses and then have recovery.
Right.
Private
Give
joke.
me grief for using that term.
I'm not in it. No, but we are. We need to have a period of recovery whether it's exercise, whether it's, stress, whether it's joy and happiness, like we operate with cycles. And if we don't allow ourselves to go through those cycles, then we're not going to heal properly. And I mean, it's a physical thing. Like if you don't sleep,
Even
you don't heal.
even sleep health.
Exactly.
And how
Absolutely.
many sex therapists forget to ask about sleep health as a major contributor
Absolutely.
to a lot of sexual problems?
Well, I think when
So we-
people,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say when people have low testosterone, I'm like, well, do you have sleep apnea? Are you getting any oxygen?
Right.
Because, it's a very easily correctable cause of low testosterone.
Yeah, and a lot of the sexual problems that
Right.
then
Right.
cascade after that. So like we were saying at dinner, it's the perfect approach. In sex therapy, we like to say all roads lead to Rome. There's a lot of different
Can you say that in sex therapy?
Sure. Theoretical orientations, different approaches, whatever a psychotherapist's approach can probably be applied.
Got it.
But the one road that's been difficult to pave and connect has been really integrating sexual medicine and sex therapy. So short of the fantasy that there'll be someday a sex therapist in every urologist's office, every gynecologist's office, just
Yeah.
across the board through all of medicine, until that day, you are creating that pathway to really treat systemically. In systems theory and
Yes.
psychotherapy
Yes.
says the family's the patient or the couple's the patient.
Right.
And the members are, everybody's contributing, but if the focus is on the couple as the patient, then it reduces a lot of the blaming and helps folks to realize that it's a holistic thing. It's not a symptom that we
No,
have to treat.
it's a dynamic.
If your genitals would only do this, our problems would be solved.
Right.
Maybe if your relationship was healthier and you were feeling more affectionate toward each other, it would become less important what your genitals are or aren't doing.
Right.
Right.
Basic stuff,
Right.
but that integration is missing.
And that really is the key. And again, what a lot of the stuff that you do, it is integrative. But the tendency, and especially in the medical field, is
Oh,
to be more
absolutely.
dissective, to be more analytical,
Absolutely.
break everything down into isolated individual parts, because it also reflects that a field is made up of specialists who
right.
only see their own tiny little part. How often do we talk about and joke about that? We have to remind urologists and gynecologists that there are people attached to those genitals.
Wow. Yeah.
And people use them in ways that affect their lives.
It's not just,
Right.
That's right.
collecting a Euroflow sample.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's
So-
more than plumbing.
Well, so the same problem exists in medicine. So sexual medicine is still sort of outcast from all the rest of medicine. And despite the fact that we know that when you have regular sexual activity, your blood pressure's better, your muscle tone is better, your eyesight is
Stress
better.
hormones
Your-
are
it's like
lower.
all kinds of
That's
things in the
right.
body
Sleep.
improve when you have good sexual activity. And part of it is blood flow, and part of it is oxytocin, which helps kind of heal us and make us more youthful, growth hormone, all of those things. And still today in medicine, sex is kind of over here. We don't really talk about it. It's hush hush. And then there's medicine. And I think that's
mental health too.
yeah.
Well, but
it's still crazy to me that the APA doesn't recognize sex therapy
Right.
as a subspecialty when there's hundreds of kinds of psychologists I've never even heard of that they get a category, but sex therapy doesn't.
Well, but again, you'd also, if it did, then I think there would be a lot of people advertising on psychology today that would have to take sex therapy off of their list
anybody
because
can
now
check a
all of a
box,
sudden,
right?
yeah, exactly, and that becomes just a box people check. It's just, oh, sure, I do that.
Right.
So I've had sex before, so I can help you with yours. And
Right.
I mean,
right.
it's
I
that's not
counseled
really
my
an
girlfriends in high
exaggeration.
school,
Yes,
so I can do
yes.
it for you.
That-
But I
There's a
love
lot of that.
your old classic that being an excellent mechanic doesn't mean you're a good driver.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right?
sweet.
That,
Yeah. Right? You can know everything, the ins and outs about the body, but
Right.
again, it's the function that we have to look at.
Right.
And again, the mental health part, even in sex, we often don't really give enough credit to the mindset, the emotional environment that the person is living in, and how that really is so important.
Absolutely.
with everything.
I tell people your psychology trumps your biology. Mm-hmm. Most of the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really does. And there are times where because that is the sort of the controlling mechanism.
Yeah.
And the body is generally taking its orders from the mind.
Right.
People are always surprised to find out that most urologists would report that about half of their Viagra scripts are not refilled. Mm-hmm. And of course, people think, oh my God, you mean the miracle erection pill? How could it not work? Well, anxiety is stronger than Viagra.
Yeah.
And it's still the same old, I still hear Susan's voice in my head all the time,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Friction and fantasy.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And if
Sexy
you're
thoughts.
worrying about your erection, that's the best way to lose it.
That's the best way to lose it.
Right?
That's
Sexy
right.
thoughts, take the
Right.
pill, forget about it.
Right.
And friction and fantasy and everything you need without the pill, you need with the pill.
Absolutely. So let's go into, before we completely run out of time. Yeah, it really does go fast. We were talking earlier, and I think it certainly needs to be more of a conversation. We talk a lot about it, but not that much about it. We talk desire.
Okay.
Especially now, there's a new medication for women. That's the holy grail of the pharmaceutical industry is
The
to
ongoing
get
quest.
desire in a pill.
Wait, are you talking about the...
Bremelanotide.
Yeah,
Yes.
bremelanotide. Because, people were hoping for Addie, but it didn't really...
No. Although those numbers were never that good, but for those small percentage of women that
You
it
know
can
what?
help, it could be great.
Marketing has a lot to do with it.
Well,
I hate to say that.
well, the first 2
Marketing has
years
a
they
lot
didn't
to
do
with
any.
that. Right. Like, best way to bury your
Sold-
product.
they
Don't
sold
tell
it 3
anybody about
times.
it.
Yeah,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Who's gonna know? But yeah, no, I have nice hopes for bremelanotide.
Right.
Knowing the science.
But I think that's again that's a pebble in a pond, right? For me, if we kind of look at what really makes things ripple and what really desire, the basis of desire, where does that come from? And are we different? Are men and women different in
I think
the way we experience desire?
so. In my opinion, I think yes, but I think there's also individual differences amongst men and individual differences amongst women because you have, so many individual differences to begin with. So I believe that desire is a composite of what's happening with hormones, with your psychology around sex, with your situation, with what you're socialized, to believe is sexy and or appropriate and or what you think you should be doing. There's so many things that go into desire. And unfortunately, whenever the pharmaceutical industry gets involved or medicine gets involved because of the reductionistic nature of it, we want to break it down to, it's this one thing.
Right.
And it's not one thing. It's like a million things, right? It's like, who was your second grade teacher and did you have a crush on her? And did the person sitting next to you write you notes? And, what did you see your parents talking about? And did you see them being affectionate in what movie? Like everything.
That's
that
part
you
of the template.
experience in life, right? And who can pull apart that fabric? It's so rich.
Even the most recent attempt at sorting this out, I don't think it was all that helpful, but the new language in DSM-5, where now HSDD, hypoactive sexual desire disorder, which used to seem like it was tailor-made for women to talk about on daytime TV, is now diagnosable only in men. And now women have a new diagnosis, female sexual interest / arousal disorder, which, 2013 or 2015, I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
So looking at that right there, that split, men have desire issues, women have
Disorder.
interest
And
issues,
arousal
interest and
disorder.
arousal issues.
Now-
So is desire and
But
interest
so
different?
Right.
Interest and arousal should not be in the same category for women because there's a lot of discordance with psychological and physical arousal for women. With men, there seems to be a lot more concordance. And, the studies have shown that. And it's probably because since the time that, we were talking about embryology earlier, since the time that the penis arrives on the scene, men have this fantastic biofeedback mechanism that they can use for their entire life. And so their erectile tissue, they have the sensations from that all the time. And they are probably touching themselves on their erectile tissue all the time just to go to the bathroom, right? Several times a day. maybe that's not the most erotic thing, but they have contact with their clothing, and so they can sense whenever something is psychologically arousing to them, does that match with their physical arousal? And then they can pair that up in their brain over a lifetime. Women's erectile tissue being internal, they don't have the same ability to sense it if they are not familiar with what that feels like.
Remember, we used to call it subjective arousal disorder, where you'd see like these little arguments going on, the researchers in the other room with the computers and the light diffractors.
Little plasmography.
Saying, I see you were turned on, and the woman
Like,
says,
"No,
no,
I
I
wasn't."
wasn't.
No, I don't care what your machine said.
I was not lubricated.
You have to believe her, right?
Right.
No matter what the machines say.
Right.
Right.
And so the development in women is such that they may create the whole idea of what's arousing and sexy psychologically, and that's not always, doesn't always jive with what happens with them physically when they're getting aroused. And I think that that's one of the things that once women become sexually active and they become more aware of what it feels like for their erectile tissue, to be engorged, and then they get lubricated and they get the, butterfly sensations and all that wonderful stuff. And then they're like, oh, and it happens to be when I'm, hearing all these wonderful, nice things from my partner. And so now they can match those two together. And then when they start to feel that physical sensation again, they say, wait a second, I know what this is, but that doesn't come as easily for women as it does for men because of that whole biological feedback.
And it almost sounds like in what you're saying that men have more of that because of that connectivity. And I like that way of looking at it, that there's more of a trigger for their arousal as opposed to women where it almost has to come from some kind of script.
Yeah, absolutely. And and unfortunately the scripts haven't been so favorable for women.
That's true. There's unfortunately still alive and well a lot of sexism in the scripts. That generally, if a man is with a woman who complains of low desire, he generally doesn't have to take it personally, right? He can go, women, they're all like that. You all got to beg them and buy them gifts and get them in the mood. If a woman's with a man who complains of low desire, she will invariably take it personally or feel like something's wrong. He's
Take
not
him to the
attracted to
doctor.
me,
Yeah,
or I got
that
the
too.
one guy in the world who's not horny all the time. Right? Or maybe he's gay or whatever catastrophe.
Right.
But I think that's
So-
almost like global, even in a dating situation. If and again, heterosexually, if a man isn't interested in a woman in a bar,
If he doesn't put the
her
moves on.
response is, "There's something wrong with me." But if he gets turned down, well, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, that goes into socialization and culture.
Yeah.
I think
That's part of the template too.
it is part of it, and that's why I said it's so intricate. And that's why I think to do sex therapy and to do sex therapy well, you really need to spend time and ask questions of the patient. And it's not about just like, do you get morning erections? How long does
Not
your erection last?
Assessment.
On a scale of 1 to
Same
10,
way, Right.
right? How hard is your erection? And then, okay, well, here's a script. Let me know how it goes. That doesn't really speak to a multitude of other things that might be going on for that patient. Are they satisfied in their relationship? Do they feel like they're being judged? Do they feel emotionally responsible for their partner's emotional state? It's like...
Is it possible his genitals are being more honest than his brain?
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah. But again, I think that socialization is still alive and well, and we do see those two different pathways. Even when we get to older age, when we look in seniors, for most heterosexual senior women, their almost entire sexual world is dictated by men. And even if they have a partner, no matter what might be going on with them, it's usually the partner's state that will determine what kind of sex they may or may not be having. So there's still very much that, women's
You mean
needs are kind of
arousal?
secondary. Right? No, in terms of,
not sure,
well,
but-
part of the arousal is there too, but
Arousal
it's like,
is like, putting that on the partner, that if I'm not turned on, it's the partner's fault.
but I'm
right,
talking about
instead
women,
of
even
turning
older women,
myself
even
on.
allowing themselves to become aroused, and not necessarily their own doing. It's still much more partner directed. still more partner dependent.
Are you saying it depends on what the partner wants to do and is capable
Right.
of doing?
Right.
So
now,
they have
fortunately,
no-
it's changing. But
They have no toys in their nightstand.
oh no, many of them do.
I was gonna say,
It's
just, you know.
I love in talking to some of these home health
That's okay, honey.
organizations.
Look what we have here.
People are shocked to find when somebody passes in a nursing home and they clean their stuff out, what they find under the
Right,
bed sometimes.
right.
Well,
Which is heartening. It really is.
Right.
It's very heartening.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Well-
we haven't gone as far, sort of off of the old script that I think like to
and
think we
both
have.
of our fields, medicine and mental health, had better quick, because as you often point out, old people today and in the future are not our grandparents' old people. They're us.
We're not gonna be our grandparents' old
in
people.
20 years.
So what do you mean by that?
Right?
Well, baby boomers, people, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll crew are now moving into nursing homes and healthcare facilities. And
Yeah.
they're not going to give up, their lifestyle or have their caregivers
Yeah.
assume that they're sweet little old grandmas and grandpas that are asexual.
Yeah.
Right, like our grandparents were viewed.
Right.
Of course,
I mean,
they weren't.
They said that to a nursing home administrator, which when I was just starting a lot of my senior stuff, this really was the impetus for a lot of that. I was just talking to this administrator, and then it really started to dawn on me. And I even said to her, I said, in 20 years, you're going to get me. You're not ready. You are definitely not ready. And it's just like, we really do have to make these changes and create these systems that, do kind of acknowledge and are able to meet the needs of people that are aging sexually, at least, a lot differently, even functionally.
It's
I
a
think
good time.
it is. I hope they don't put their head in the sand and just hope that, they're old, so their sexual issues should all just go away.
No,
And,
that's why I
and
think it's a good time for sex
Yeah.
therapy. Sexual medicine can help. And as medicine recognizes that it's a quality of life issue, that they can't, any discipline,
Yeah.
that they can't get away with ignoring anymore.
Yeah.
That it's,
And I think one of the difficulties, and you brought up Viagra, one of the difficulties with a medication like Viagra is we're telling people sex should be the same at 75 as it was at 25.
Right.
And I don't agree with that.
No,
Of course.
it isn't,
that's
and
that
it shouldn't.
unrealistic message. The guy with the devil horns in the commercials, right? A lot of realistic messages have to go along with that script.
Right.
Right.
But,
And I think we're also depriving ourselves of a lot of not only quality of life, but a lot of intimate experiences
Absolutely.
by focusing
Yes.
on that act that we call sex.
Because then you
The
can't
music is going
evolve.
to start.
You can't evolve, in your sexual relationship
Right.
that way.
I want folks
Right.
to be able to get a hold of you by visiting thesexmd.com. And the number's there on the screen if you'd like to call. I also want to put in a quick plug for Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, which I'm proud to say both of these brilliant people serve as our faculty. And we
Proud
will
to
be
be.
back here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Have a great week. Thanks.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program